Okay, students, we're going to continue the watercolor techniques. This is side 2, and you're going to divide your paper up at the bottom like you see in this example. I want you to make 2 boxes on one side and then leave a whole section of 2 boxes undivided for a little bit larger practice. Please label the 2 boxes sponging and dry brush. Now for sponging and dry brush, you're going to pretend as if you are sponging leaves on a tree and dry brushing grass in a meadow. And then we're going to actually add a little bit of stippling or pointillism into the dry brush grass for some flowers. And this gives you a little bit more of a practical idea of where you could use these techniques. So what you want to do is grab a series of colors and start mixing up your paint. I use yellow, a couple of greens, and some browns. And then you can pick a little bit of a flower color. So you'll see me sponging on the yellow, and then with the dry brush technique, you want to get a lot of paint on your brush, but you also want to rest it on a paper towel and allow the paper towel to gently absorb some of the water. Take your fingers and gently spread the bristles apart just to give them a little bit more separation because they are brand new. Don't pull them so hard that you ruin them. Now when you do dry brush, you want to use a very light feathering type of a texture. Lift the brush at the end of the brush stroke and practice very lightly touching the paper with the brush. It's better to have to build it up rather than go overboard too quickly. Now what I would like you to do is alternate between the sponging and the dry brush. While you are doing the sponging, your dry brush will begin to dry and allow for the second color to show on top, and vice versa. Now you'll see me adding the green to the yellow layer and building up the foliage slowly. Next, you'll see me adding a little bit of green dry brush and building up the grass slowly. When I finish, you will see me end with almost a mix of brown and green together. I like to sponge a little bit of brown on and also give the grass a little bit of shadow color, but then you're also going to see me put a little bit of green over as the last top layer. Now I want you to pick a color in contrast to the green in order to add some little pointillism flowers. I'm going to use a little red, a little orange, and you're going to get the paint kind of flowing, so to speak, blot your brush, and then kind of take your fingers and separate the bristles again. Now for this one, I'm using a round brush, and you may have noticed before on the dry brush grass, I was using a flat brush. The round brush will give me a little better chance of making dots if I'm just trying to add a little bit of flower accent. Next, we're going to start a little bit larger practice of a tree with a sky and some foliage and grass. So I took my ruler and just gave my scene a simple horizon line. And then I'm going to paint an extremely light wash of a blue sky. And then I'm going to paint an extremely light wash of green as a base for the ground. You can use a little different colors if you want to, but keep your first wash layers extremely light. Now, as you finish this, you're going to want to let this base layer dry before you start the actual tree itself. Please make sure that you do give this dry time. It's going to make your tree stand out and not blur into the background. Next, what you're going to do is mix up some browns for the tree trunk. And I'm going to start by leaving a little bit of negative space as I paint in a series of lines for a little bit of the trunk and some of the branches. And you can see that I'm leaving some space through, and eventually I'm going to connect a lot of these lines, but not yet. Now, as you add little remnants of branches, keep those lines disconnected, because when you add the foliage on top, you want to be able to see that just little parts of the branches are peeking out and that you don't have a continuous straight line. Okay, so you want to continue adding layers of different browns, and slowly as you add these different browns, you're going to start closing those gaps of negative space. Work your way from lightest colors to darkest, and if you notice that your brush strokes look really wet, give them just a few minutes to dry. You don't want to touch two of the wet colors together. You're going to get sort of a bloom or a blurring effect of the wet on wet technique. You're trying to mimic tree trunk texture, which is linear. So you want to do more of a glazing effect, where you're going to let layers dry in between. I'm going to start layering on some grass little by little. So you'll see I'm going to add just a little bit of the light browns. And as I work my way through the scene, I'm going to build up to a few different colors. I'm also going to start my different sponge layers. Now, as I notice that my brush strokes on the tree trunk start to dry, now I can start to actually blend them together without that risk of blurring. I can also work to very lightly take some of the wet paint and fill in some of those negative space gaps so that they appear a little bit more of a light brown and not so much blue and green. So what I do is just keep dipping my brush in the water, but I'm not adding any more paint. What I'm doing is just very gently softening the paint layers that are already there. Next, you'll see me using a flat brush and a very dark brown. See how this makes a nice sharp line? This is gonna help you with just a little bit of those fine dark brown lines to accentuate the bark on the tree. And if you blur these in a little too much, what I'd like you to do is let them dry. And you can use your wet brush as sort of a blender or an eraser even to lift off paint or to blend colors to a little bit more of a softness. Now, you want to make sure that your brush is not soaking wet and that every time you dip it in the water or rinse it, you're giving it a gentle blot, either on your paper towel or your t-shirt. Now, as you continue sponging your tree, if you need to spill over into different boxes to make the clump of tree foliage look a little bit better, don't worry about that. You're gonna see as I zoom out a little bit in a second that I have spilled into the box above and a little bit to the sides, but it was helping me shape the foliage a little bit better. So don't worry about it if you would need to do that on your own. Now you want to add just a little bit of those pointillism flowers in the grass. Don't make these too watery or too heavy. This is still a dry brush effect. You can see I built up a bunch of different colors, and you can even use multiple colors if you would like to practice some of those just little flower elements. At the end, I would like you to practice with your very small round brush, making some initials for yourself on this painting. Make sure that wherever you are painting, it is already dry and that you can see them nice and sharp. If you mess it up here, don't worry.